Okay guys, we are done with this post card. Now let's see how we can save a single post. So inside this save post component, at first I need to have a user hook. I'm going to call this isSaved and set isSaved, which is equal to user hook, and it's going to be false by default. Okay, so using this user hook, when I click this button and when the post is saved, I want to change this color to be yellow. So in here I'm going to change this double quote to be temporary string, and down here I'm going to set a condition. If it's saved, I want to change the text to be yellow and 600. Otherwise I want this to be this empty string. Okay, now let's make a function here. I'm gonna call this handle save. It should be asynchronous function. Okay, and just pass this function here, on click and handle save. Now to save our post, we need to have sub collections. So sub collection for this post inside here. At first we need to get our current user. So we need to check if the user is authenticated or not. We are going to get this current user, and it's coming from our context API. Okay, this should be current user. Now let's import it manually. Okay, now inside this function we need to have a try and catch block. Now we need to set a condition if the user is authenticated or if we have this current user. Then we are going to first make our reference for our database. I'm gonna call this saveref, which is equal to this doc function coming from Firebase. At first we need to get our DB and our collections name, which is called users, and following that we need to add our current user ID. So this will help us target the specific collection. Let's say we want to target this specific user, so we should have this user ID when we want to add sub collections inside the specific user data. And following that we need to add our sub collection name here. So I'm going to call this save post, and again this should have another ID, and this time I wanna print this post.id to this sub collection. Okay, it should be post ID. Alright, this is our reference. Down here we need to check if the data of this saved post exists inside our database. We are going to delete that using this delete doc function, which is coming from Firebase file store, and we are going to just send this saveref here. Okay, and we need to send a toast notification also .success, and we are going to say post has been unsaved. But otherwise we are going to add this. So in here I'm going to say await satck, and we are going to add this save reference here, and following that we are going to add our data that should be saved. So inside this object we are going to print all the post data here. Okay, now let's send this toast notification again, and this should be saved. Alright, as you can see we don't have any error. If I click this button, you can see post has been saved. So the color is not changed because we haven't implemented the visited hook. Don't worry about that. Now let's check our sub collection. As you can see we have a new sub collection inside the specific user which is currently logged in, which is this one. Okay, and we could get this post data inside our sub collection. Now let's implement this yellow color when the post is saved. Alright, at first we need to get our sub collections data. So we are going to make a new custom hook. So inside this component, I'm going to open this hook, and this time it should be used single page. Okay, .jsx. I'm going to generate this React functional component, and if I open the use page here, I'm going to copy everything from here and just paste it here. Okay, let's import this useState hook and this useEffect hook. We are going to get this query function, this collection, and this db. Okay, and also I can change this to be get single data. Alright, inside the save post, I'm going to get this data loading from this use single page hook, and we need to send multiple props in here. So now we are going to make sub collections inside our users collection. As you can see, our sub collection exists inside our users. Okay, so for that cause, we are going to target our users collections here, and to get a specific collection, we are going to write here current user.uid. We need to move it up this hook, and following that, we need to write our sub collection name, and it was save post, which is this one. Okay, and make it save post. So now let's receive these props. So in here, inside this hook, at first we need to have our collection name. Okay, and following that, we had this id. I'm going to call this id and the sub collection name, sub collection. Okay, so let's print it here, id and sub collection. Okay, if I refresh the page here, let's see what is the error. Okay, on a snapshot is not imported. So inside this single hook, I'm going to import this on a snapshot, and now you can see we don't have any error. So if I console log this data here, console log data, now you can see our user will have this single save post. Okay, so now what we need to do, we need to define a useEffect hook here, useEffect. So inside this useEffect, we are going to find if our user have saved this post or not. So I'm going to say here set is saved, and we are going to find our specific data here. So I'm going to say if we have data, then I'm going to say data.find. We are going to get each and every item here, and item.id is equal to this post.id. This should be item. Okay, and we are going to send some dependencies, data, and also this post.id. Now let's check it. As you can see, because I have already saved this post, this color has been changed. If I click it back, you can see the color will be changed again, and the post has been unsaved. Okay, you can toggle between save and unsave post in here. Okay, now let's display this inside our profile. As you can see, we have this list here. So I'm going to open this component. Inside this profile component, I'm going to open this profile component activities and profile list. Okay, again we are going to get that hook here, so I just copy them from here and add it here. let's import this hook, and also we need to have this current user because we need the ID here. Let's import this block. Okay, and I forget to add some dependencies here, so this should be db, and we need to add our ID here. Okay guys, we have this data. Now as you can see, if I open this profile which is not belong to the user, which is currently logged in, if I click this list, as you can see, this saved post of this user is private, so other users cannot see that. Okay, but if I open my own list, as you can see, I'm able to see all my saved posts. Okay, so in here we need to set a condition. So I'm going to pass this get user data to this component down here, to this saved component. Okay, and we need to receive it here. So now we need to check whether the user which is logged in is matching with this post id.user id or not. So inside this div, I'm going to set a condition. So I'm going to say if this current user dot uid is equal to this get user data dot user id, then I want to display post here. Let's say post. Otherwise, I want to display a component called private list. Okay, now let's make this component down here. Now let's check it. As you can see, it is displaying the post because this user ID and this current user UID are matching. Okay, and instead of this post, I'm going to return a parenthesis, and inside here we are going to have a div. Let's close this div here. Okay, now our div will have a class name of flex column. Gap is going to be 2rem, and finally we need to have margin bottom of 2rem. So inside here we are going to display our post. So at first we need to check whether our data exists inside this array or not. If data.length is equal to 0, then I want to display a message inside this paragraph saying that get user data dot username has no saved post. Okay, so as you can see in here, because we have this one saved post, if I unsave it here and try to open this profile again, you can see it's saying that this user or Amir Khan has no saved post. Okay, let's style this paragraph. I'm going to give it a class name. Text color should be gray and 500. And also I'm going to give a different style to this username. So let me copy this and store it inside this span tag. And I'm going to give it a class name of capitalized, and margin right should be 1. Okay, now you can see here is our message, and let's save this post here. Okay, and if I open this profile again, you can see this time there is no message displayed because we have post. So beside this condition, we are going to map through our data here. So at first we need to check if we have a loading. We want to display this loading component. Okay, otherwise we just map through this data. Let's add this question mark here, and we are going to get each and every post and the index, and we just return our post card here. If you remember, we had a component which is post card. Okay, we just simply pass this post to this component, and also we need to have a key. the key should be equal to index. Okay, now let's check it. As you can see, we have this saved post. So if I refresh the page here and open this list, you can see we have this post. So if I unsave it, you can see this post will be deleted from here. Now let's implement that private list like this one. So if you remember, we had this component. So down here we need to receive our username. So I'm going to get this username from our component, and it should be get user data dot username. Okay, so now in here, instead of this heading 1, we need to have a div. Okay, and this div will have a class name of flex column. Justify should be center, and also item center. Gap should be 3 rem, and text also should be center. So we are going to bring everything in the middle like this one. So in here, at first we need to have a paragraph. So inside this span tag, we are going to add our username. So username, you can write here save post or private. Okay, and this span tag will have a class name, and just make it capitalized. Okay, you cannot see this here because we don't have any other user, but it will look like this. Or you can just say here, if it's not equal, then we wanna display this. Okay, now you can see. Alright, you can see here is our private list. So since our capitalize is not working, this should be capitalized. Alright, now our text is here. And also let's have this locker. So down here we need to have a span tag with the class name of text 10 rem, and also text color should be gray and 500. Now let's add this icon here. So this icon is coming from React icons. So let's import it here. Okay, this should be lock, and this one lock. Okay, now you can see here is our lock. Okay, and this should be text. Now you can see here is our lock. Alright, we are done with the save post. Now let's display our post card also in this tab. I'm going to open this profile home here, and let's get rid of this one. And inside this component, we are going to print all the posts which is belong to our user. So now we are going to get our get user data here, because we need to check the ID. And here we need to fetch our post data again. So I'm going to write here data and loading, which is equal to use fetch, and we are going to just send our post collection here. Okay, so now we need to filter our post here. I'm going to say count user post, which is equal to this data dot filter. We are going to get each and every post, and we just say post dot user ID is equal to this get user data dot user ID. Okay, now if I add a heading 1 here and say post, and if I console log this user post here, now let's check it. Okay, since we have an error here, let's find out what is the error. Okay, data.filter is not a function. You can set a condition here first. So if we have data, we wanna filter this data. Now if I refresh the page here, as you can see, here is our filtered data. Alright. Now instead of this heading 1, we are going to have a div. This div will have a class name of flex column. Gap should be 5 and margin bottom is going to be 4 rem. Now inside here, we are going to map through this data, but at first we need to check whether the user has post or not. So in here I'm going to say if this user post.length is equal to 0, then we just simply return a message here inside this paragraph, and we are going to say this get user data dot username has no post. Okay, again this should be a different style. I'm going to write here span and add this username inside it, and this should be capitalized. Okay, and also we are going to say text gray and 500. Now because user has some post, it's not displaying here. So after this one, we need to check whether we have a loading or not. So if we have loading here, then we want to display this loading component. Otherwise, we need to map through this user post. So user post dot map, and we are going to get each and every post and index. Again, we need to just return this post card. Okay, and let's send this post here. Should be equal to post and key is equal to index. Okay, now you can see this user has only one post. Okay, I should change this. I'm gonna open this profile and this should be equal. Okay, currently the user has no saved post, and if he click this button, you can see the user has a new saved post. Okay, now let's add another post here. Let's say post number 2 is just added. You can see here is a long story of this platform, and you can add your own text here. So I'm going to make it a link. Let's add this Firebase link here. Okay, this is a link. So if I click this publish, and I'm gonna add a new image here. Let's add book here, reading, and you can add some other text, let's say post. If I click this publish now, submitting, and you can see here we have our post. And I forget to add something else here. As you can see, when the post is belong to the user will get this button also, that he can delete or edit his story. Now let's add that button. So I'm going to open this postcard here. Now in here we need to get our current user also. So I'm going to say here current user, and it's coming from our context API. Okay, and by the way, I haven't used this loading. You can simply use it here if we have a loading. I wanna display the loading component here. So now down here we need to set a condition to check whether this post is belong to the user which is currently logged in or not. So if current user dot uid is equal to this user id, then we are going to return a new component called actions. Okay, and we just pass our post to it. Now let's make this actions component. Inside this actions, we need to have actions component. Okay, now let's import it. So I'm going to import it from here. As you can see, we have these actions. So I don't need this component. Let me close them all. So this div will have a class name of relative, because we are going to have a model here. Okay, so let's add our button that will open our model here. So this should be button, and the text is going to be this icon. Okay, and this icon is coming from React icon. Alright, now you can see here is our icon. Okay, now let's style this icon. I'm going to give it a class name, and text should be to Excel. Now you can see here is our button, which is similar to this one. Alright, and I don't know why it has more padding from this image. Now let's figure it out. So I'm going to open this post component here. Okay, to avoid this problem, I just turned this fragment to be section. Okay, and if I refresh the page, you can see we don't have much spaces between this icon and this image. Okay, now let's keep up inside this action. So we need to have a reusable component for this drop down, which is this one. Okay, so now let's add this drop down. I'm going to add this component inside this utils. Okay, drop down .jsx, and for now let's just print the children here. Okay, and this should be children. Alright, now inside here we need to have two buttons. Again, these buttons will be reusable buttons, and we need to have an onClick function, which is empty string for now, and also a title for this button, and the title is going to be either story, and the second one is going to be delete story. Okay, so in here I'm going to say const button, which is equal to this arrow function, and we are going to get click and this title here. Okay, now let's return, and inside here we are going to have a button. The text should be title. Okay, now let's check it, but before that we need to import this drop down here. Okay, now you can see here are our buttons. We need to have a class name, but we need to define some dynamic class names here. Padding 2. For hover effect, we need to give a background color of gray and 100, and also we need to give another hover effect of text and black with the opacity of 80. Width should be full, and text size is going to be small, and text is going to be left. Also, in the second line we need to set a condition. So as you can see in here, the color of this delete is red, and this one is this gray color. So for that we need to set a condition. So I'm going to say if title is equal to this delete story, which is this one. Okay, then we are going to give it a text color of red and 600. and this should be inside this double quote, and otherwise this should be empty string. Now you can see we have different color, and also we have this effect here, hover effect. Now let's style our drop down menu. Okay, so this div will have a class name. Now we need to add our shadows class again, flex column, and position should be absolute. Okay, from the right it should be 0, and from the top it should be 2 rem, and we need to have a white background color. Now let's check it. As you can see, here is our drop downs, but we need to have a weight, so we are going to get this weight dynamically. So in here, following the children, we are going to have a size props, and also we need to have a useState hook. So when I click this button, this drop down will be shown, and when I click it back, this should be hidden. So in here I'm going to receive two props here. So the first one is going to be show drop and set show drop. Okay, now let's move back to the actions. At first let's define the useState hook. So it should be show drop and set show drop. It's gonna be equal to useState hook and it will be false. Okay, now let's pass this. So I'm going to say show drop is equal to this show drop, and set show drop is equal to this set show drop, and we need to have another props which is this size. Okay, so our drop down size is going to be equal to this width 7 rem. Okay, now in here we're going to add this dynamically, so I just turn this to be template string. Okay, this should be shadow, and finally we should add this size width here. Okay, now you can see our drop down is looking good. So in here we need to set a condition. At first I need to wrap this with this fragment, and we need to wrap it with curly braces, and if we have this show drop, we want to show this component. Okay, now you can see we don't have that component, and using this button, so in here I'm going to say handle click, which is equal to this arrow function, and we just set this show drop to be not show drop. Okay, so it will toggle between true and false. Okay, and we need to pass an on click here and just send this handle click. Okay, so if I click this button, you can see I'm able to open this model, and if I click it back, you can see it will be dissipated. But we need to have some functionality. When I click outside of this box should be closed. So I'm going to go back to this drop down component, and in here I'm going to have a use effect hook. Okay, and also we need to have a use ref hook, const drop ref, which is equal to use ref, and it's gonna be null by default. Now we need to pass this to this div. Ref is equal to drop ref. Okay, and now inside here we need to have a function, and I'm gonna call this click outside, and it will be equal to this arrow function. Now we need to receive an event, because we are going to add this function inside this window.addEventListener, and this should be mouse down. Okay, and just add this click outside. Okay, now inside here we need to set a condition. So if drop ref dot current dot contains this e dot target, so we are checking if any items of this div has been selected or not. So I'm gonna add the exclamation mark here to make this condition false. So this condition is saying that if the user did not click inside this div, it means that he clicked outside. If so, we are going to set the show drop to be false, and our drop down will be closed. Okay, now you can unsubscribe to this window.addEventListeners. So I'm going to return a function here, and let's copy this from here and add it here, and this time it should be removed. Okay, alright guys, we are done with this. Now let's check it. So if I open this drop down and click outside, you can see I haven't selected anything inside this drop down, so it will be closed. And we are done with this part. Now let's push this code here. So in here I'm going to say, now let's state all the changes. Okay,